State Senator Rob Sampson is joining me now on the phone. Senator Sampson, how are you, sir?
I am well, Steve. I was enjoying your civics lesson. I was inspired by it. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm glad to hear I inspired somebody. I think it's, it's based off this article about, we're no longer teaching people to think. And the downstream impact of that is that people are become very comfortable just being sheep, being followers, letting other people tell them how to live their lives without any sort of pushback on it. And I think that's just wrong in so many ways. You and I were talking about this off the air. There's so many people who get elected to office who suddenly think that has given them the power to control people's lives, as though they were elected to be my parent. And I've never understood how anybody can ever worship any politician. I don't care what side you're on. I've never understood the worship of Obama. I never understood the worship of Trump. If they enact policies that I agree with, well, then they've earned my vote. But worship never happened. It will never happen.
Yeah, I completely agree, Steve. And it's generations of apathy that have taken us away from a country of informed citizens demanding of their government policies that ensure future prosperity, to where we are today, where it's expected when you speak to candidates for public office to ask them, what can you do for me? And I think that's what's brought us here, which is that the expectation of politicians that they are supposed to be providing for their constituents, when in fact that's the last thing I want from my government at any level. The purpose of government in America is to protect rights. It says so right in the Declaration of Independence that we are, as you stated, we are all free citizens, and that we are born with natural rights to speak, rights to pursue happiness, right to defend ourselves. And the purpose of our government is to protect those rights. The Bill of Rights is a restriction on the government itself from interfering with our natural rights. And we've gotten completely backwards, where people are expecting the government to provide for them. And I'm not trying to generalize. That's not how everybody is, obviously. But we need to restore the notion that the government elected officials are there at our convenience. They are there at our consent. Consent of the governed is something we need to restore in people's minds. And, as bad as the last couple of years have been, I would say that that's one positive that has come out of it, is that more and more people are indeed waking up and realizing that things have gotten out of hand. Their government is too large and unwieldy and affecting their freedoms, and are starting to speak up. But it's now or never. Really, we've got to end this, overarching authoritarian government that's happening nationally and in our state in particular.
Well, and that leads into one of the reasons we have you on here, and that's to talk about the governor's request to extend some of these emergency powers. Now, he's talking real nice about, I would like the legislature to come together and codify some of these things into law. And, okay, that's great. You propose things that you want to see them brought up and debated in the House and in the Senate and voted on, and that's how it should work. But at the same time, he's turning around and saying, but these other things over here, I want to be able to keep for myself, just in case I need to react, And it's the same reason he gave the last time. It's just in different words. And I am so adverse to this continuing for a number of reasons. One, because one person shouldn't have that much power. And two, I defy him to explain how we are in a state of emergency any longer.
Right. Well, as you know, I'm in complete agreement with you, of course, and I have been leading the fight, in fact, since the middle of 2020, back when it was actually quite unpopular to do so. I have been calling into question the state of emergency and the governor's, the declaration that we are, in fact, in an emergency, and his ability to do things really detrimental to our society, shutting down businesses, segregating people based on mask and vaccination status, destroying the careers and employment opportunities of thousands of people in our state. And I know many of them personally. So many people have contacted me over the last year, devastated because of their own legitimate reasons for not being able to participate in the mandates, and maybe losing a job they've had for 25 years, or not being able to receive their pension from the state of Connecticut, or some other craziness that really defies science and logic. And now here we have the governor going on his 7 times he has wanted to extend his emergency powers. And he's playing political games with it also, because the only one that can actually declare the emergency is him. And he kind of sent this odd request to the legislature asking them to declare the emergency, which I don't believe we have the power to do. And then to vote on some of the individual items. And, of course, I don't think that the majority of my colleagues, particularly on the Democrat side, want to actually vote on these things. The reason why they've granted this authority to the governor all this time is because they can hide behind the fact that it's the governor imposing mask mandates and other things. And they can simply say, well, all I did was vote to give him the power. To me, they were all on the record already voting for those things, and they should be held to account for it. But it's now or never for people to start speaking up and saying, we're not for this anymore.
Well, I think it's disingenuous, too, to say that, we didn't vote for these things. He did it. We just gave him the power to do it. But you've seen what he's done when given that power. And so you obviously are okay with what he's been doing when you've given him that power. So you are, by default, or in de facto, supporting his policies.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, they're all guilty. I mean, but that's been the purpose. The purpose has been to enable the governor to take the heat on those hard questions. And what people don't realize, too, they think that the government has actually been shut down. Well, the state legislature has not been shut down. We had a complete legislative session last time. We passed hundreds of bills into law. We met, largely by Zoom, but we voted on every bill to become a law in person in the House and Senate in Hartford. And we've always had the ability, even since the very first day of the pandemic, to meet and debate and vote on policy for the state of Connecticut to deal with this situation. So the idea that that's ever been necessary is false. Our hospitals have not been overrun, and certainly not within the last year. I don't think we've reached 20% of hospital capacity for COVID patients. And, the last time the extension was done at the end of September, it was around 2% of hospital beds were being used for COVID-19. And that is, of course, the traditional asterisk after the word with COVID, as opposed to, because of COVID. This whole thing is a charade. And I am calling on people to make it known that they are tired of this. They not only don't want the governor to be making these decisions for them, but they want their voice back. Because effectively what this does is it limits the ability of their own voice by virtue of limiting the ability of their elected representatives who were chosen to speak on their behalf to make these policy decisions. We need to get our voices back. And I would also say one other thing, Steve, and that is that, across this state, we have 169 towns, and they have, town councils and boards of education, and they also have been deprived of their rights to make decisions in their school districts and for their town buildings and so forth, and they ought to be speaking up. And I'm not suggesting that they should go out of their way to defy the governor's executive orders, but they can say that they don't like them. They couldn't issue a resolution or a statement or write a letter to the governor or make it known publicly to the people of their town and the news media that they want control back and they want to be able to do their jobs and make policy for their towns.
One of the things that I've been really kind of disheartened to discover in so many of these elected officials around these cities and towns is their desire to pass off responsibility to the governor for all of these decisions that they want to see made. We saw the group of mayors from up in the northern part of the state come together and say that the governor should issue a statewide mask mandate. And to me, it's like, no, you're the mayor of West Hartford, let's say. If you want to have a mask mandate in West Hartford, well, then you have that power. Do it. Let your citizens then choose whether they like you and will reelect you. But to pass that off to the governor to demand it happen across the state, you don't have that kind of power. You shouldn't have that kind of power.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, if you're going to run for elected office and you're going to serve in that capacity, do your job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
You said before the break, don't be sheep. Well, that doesn't just apply to people that are allowing their rights to be taken away. It applies to people that serve in public office, too. In my experience, you have the Democrats, you have the Republicans, and within the Republican Party, there tends to be people that are very familiar about our founding principles and are very concerned about the loss of freedom and are willing to speak up. Those are the people that need to be energized and realize that there are so many individual citizens in this state, across the entire state, in small towns and big cities both, who are waiting patiently for them to start speaking up and demanding that we get our freedoms back.
Well, I hope you're able to just persuade many of the Democrats to your side of this, because I think, again, while the governor wants to put in his letter that there is a state of emergency, but he doesn't define the state of emergency. He simply says he has to have this power in case he needs to be able to move quickly. I think if we get into a situation which all numbers, all science say that we are moving away from this situation, but if we get back into a situation where he needs them, we can ask for them again. Just to extend them, just to say that they extended them, I think it's disingenuous in the extreme.
I completely agree. We've talked about this before, Steve. The last time he made the same claim. I need to renew my emergency powers because I might need them. What kind of absurdity is that?
Yeah.
The governor has the power at any point in time, no matter what it is. And in fact, this is a big problem, but he has the ability at any point in time to declare an emergency, anytime. And that moment, his powers begin, and he can declare his executive orders. The legislature does have the power to stand in the way of that, but we're not standing in the way at all now and haven't been, so I don't see that that would be a problem in the future. And if there was a legitimate crisis that did occur at some point, a resurgence of the virus or something, God knows, he would be able to do it. And, the thing is, if there was a legitimate crisis, we wouldn't be having this debate. We would be respecting the idea that we need to have that executive authority for that temporary period of time. The issue here is that the governor has been ruling our state as a king for nearly 2 years, and in defiance of all logic. I stood up on the floor of the Senate on September 28th, which is the last time that we renewed this, and I made an ironclad case that no one can refute that we were not in a state of emergency and that this emergency declaration was unneeded. And sadly, having the facts on your side doesn't matter. You said a moment ago, I hope you can persuade your Democratic colleagues. Well, I hope so too, but having the facts before them was not enough to make that happen. The only thing that makes politicians react is concern over their election chances the next time around. So it's up to the people to let their legislators know, I'm not going to support you. In fact, I will work against you if you continue to enable the governor and stop doing your job. It's time you got started doing your job.
I wish more people would take advantage of the opportunity that they do have with emails, with phone calls. And it doesn't take a lot of phone calls. It doesn't take a lot of emails, but just send a quick note. It's like 3 or 4 sentences. Because all the elected officials need to hear is that someone may not support them in the next election, just like you were saying, because you have to understand their motivations. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier in this hour with, this we don't teach people to think anymore. They know this. They take advantage of this. And that's why they can do things like, support the filibuster and then turn right around and call it racist, because they know that people will just follow right along like sheep and just say, oh, okay. But no, you have to have some backbone here. You got to stand up and let them know that you don't want this to happen, or you do want this to happen, but you got to let them know, because otherwise they're just going to do whatever they want to do that's in their own best interest.
Right. Well, and I mean, the thing is, the deck is stacked against us, Steve. As you know, it's not just these politicians that are relying on the apathy and complexities of the political process and the legislation and the political world, filtering down to the average citizen who's just trying to support their family and go to work each day and live their lives. That's the concept, that we began this conversation with, which is the beauty of America is that the notion is that we should have maximum freedom and the government's supposed to stay out of our way except for protecting our rights. That's why as the government grows, we end up losing our liberty gradually. And that's why that's a major tenet of the Republican Party, which I like to remind my fellow Republicans because they seem to forget this all the time. Republicans can be described as the fighters for freedom, but also for limited government, because limited government is the answer to most of our problems. Government is just so big. We don't even know the ways it's interfering with our lives. Government action affects everything. The products that you purchase, the quality of our health care, the cost of goods and services, your movement. And lately, in the last couple of years, it's affected even our personal medical decisions and what goes into our bodies. And that is just unforgivable in this country. It is really sad for me to be watching the news and discovering that the UK and Ireland are doing away with their mask and vaccine protocols and requirements on their citizens. And here we still have these things in Connecticut. It's sad, and it needs to stop.
So you have a couple of forums coming up here. I want to give you an opportunity to kind of promote them. But one of the other issues that you're going to be discussing is this rising crime here in the state of Connecticut. We've seen some of the policies that have been put into place around the country that have just not worked. And New York City is a perfect example of it. We just saw over the weekend the tragic murder of a 22-year-old police officer. And yet the governor of the state says that, well, a shot from an illegal gun is what killed that officer. And it's like, no. The criminal killed that officer. He may have just used a gun as his tool, but it was the criminal that killed them. But these criminal rights people and these DAs that are getting into these positions who are refusing to prosecute the law. And we have it here in the state of Connecticut as well. There was that young man who was arrested trying to steal a car in Watertown who told the cops, yeah, this is the third time I've been arrested this week. These people have no fear of our judicial system because our judicial system has become a joke.
Yeah, the entire system has broken down. So, Steve, before I respond to that, let me just say that I do have several things coming up. I have a town hall forum this Wednesday night at 6:30 in Prospect, in the Prospect Town Hall. And then next week on Tuesday, February 1st, I will be in Cheshire at the town hall there for 2 town hall forums. And, of course, I've also begun my reelection campaign, and I've got a couple of fundraisers coming up. I've got one February 2nd in the town of Wolcott. That's going to be at Five Guys Flippin' Pies. And then I'm doing another fundraiser at Paul Gregory's in Southington on February 6th. Visit my Facebook page, Senator Sampson, Senator Rob Sampson, if you want to find out information about those things. But to your point, Steve, the issue is that over the last decade, and maybe before, I mean, I've been paying attention since I first got elected in 2011, the Democrats have been essentially eviscerating the rule of law in this state and tearing down all of the logical methods in our system of laws and justice that prevent crime and actually prosecute offenders. And I could go through the entire laundry list. I've probably done it for you a few times. But, I mean, it's eliminating the risk reduction or creating the risk reduction credit program that let violent felons out early, and then raising the age for which we consider people to be juveniles, and then closing the juvenile detention centers, then stopping consent searches, preventing cops from being able to chase criminals. Last year, they decided that they were going to pass a law. One of the most amazing and crazy, insane things I have seen up there, a law that actually erases criminal records. And I mean not just minor drug offenses like they will claim. It erases real, serious, violent crimes. And how is that possible? How can you have a society where you just erase that from all knowledge and record? How can people make decisions about employment, about rentals, about anything if we're not even going to hold people accountable for the crimes in their past? There is a path to rehabilitating people, but we also have to prosecute crime to keep the people safe. It's the number one responsibility I believe you have in government is to protect people's freedoms and to keep them safe.
Yeah, and that's why I find this to be just such a horrible situation that we're in, because I was reading the other day that they got these proposals back from the group that was created the study under the Police Accountability Bill, and they basically said, well, just don't enforce these particular laws. Don't enforce the laws of people not having a headlight, or having one headlight out. Don't enforce laws because their windows are tinted darker than they've set. Well, listen. If those are laws that you think shouldn't be enforced, why are they on the books?
Exactly. I mean, it's just too absurd to even discuss. The police accountability bill is something I didn't even mention. But, the undermining of police officers throughout this process has also contributed to the lack of prosecution and enforcement that we're seeing that's rising, causing the rise in crime. And if that's the answer to it, well, I mean, I've heard two answers, which is, well, let's stop prosecuting these other crimes. And the other answer is, it's not really happening. The Republicans are making that up.
Yeah.
Pay no attention. No one was in front of your Ring doorbell last night. That was your hallucination. You didn't actually see that happen. No one stole your car, Mrs. Smith. It's ridiculous. But that's their position. And what I worry about is that we're going to go back into session, and Republicans, including myself, we're going to raise, holy cane about how we need to do something about this crime issue and we need to get a handle on it. And the Democrats are going to make all sorts of, commentary and advancements that they're with us and they're going to resolve it too. And at the end of the day, we're going to end up with some kind of bill that accomplishes nothing, but allows them to take credit that they had, did something on the issue. And the best example I have that is electric bills. I mean, I remember 2 years ago, that was like the number one thing going into the 2020 elections here in the state was people were furious about their electric rates and dragged us in for a special session. And we did this, fancy pants bill to hold Eversource accountable. And at the end of the day, what happened? Our electric rates are still going up. They're still crazy, and they've done nothing to really address that policy, but they got credit for it. People need to pay more attention, and they need to hold these elected officials accountable. And we got to start throwing them out. We really do got to start throwing these people out that have been making bad policy for year after year.
Well, and we also have to start educating ourselves. I mean, when I talk to you about these things, I don't sit here with a list of notes and talking points with you. We just have this conversation. And all of the things that I'm talking about are from memory here, because I do read and I do study and I learn and I remember. And I think that's probably the most important part is people just forget. This stuff just slips away after a period of time, and they forget what they were told. They forget what a politician promised. They forget, what happened 6 months ago with that woman being abducted in the grocery store. And I think it's incumbent upon people like me and you in our different capacities to continue to remind people of these things and remind them what was going on. And that way, when someone comes to them and says, no, it's not as bad as you think it is, you can go, really? Bing, 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 bing. Now explain how all that stuff happened if it's not as bad as you think it is.
Exactly. I was just thinking when you mentioned that, Steve, there are still people serving in the Connecticut legislature that were there in 1991 who voted to pass the income tax. I mean, to me, that's the greatest example of, people in Connecticut forgetting about what people have done, that you could survive all this time, even have voted for the Connecticut income tax. I think part of it is people get used to the status quo. Change happens gradually in our world, in our environment, in our political realm. And certainly, if things change dramatically overnight, you'd have a different reaction. But this is what's happening. We're losing our freedoms gradually over time because of the growth of government and the advancement of the abuses that are going on. I always talk about one other thing, too, which is directly related to that, and that is how we're losing the rule of law in favor of the rule of man. As important as the conversation about the Bill of Rights and things go, it's also incumbent upon us to remember that America is so great because of the rule of law, which means that we actually write our laws down in written language in a way that is clear to everyone, and so that those laws apply to everyone equally. That's one of the things that makes this country great, because, the alternative is to have a dictator or a king making determinations about what the law is based on how they feel every day. But that's what we've been living under. Mm-hmm. We have a king. We have a governor who decides what the policy is on any given day. And worse than that, he's actually empowering other, smaller monarchs, willing or unwilling. And I don't mean to get down on people, but even school principals. School principals are setting the policy inside of schools about masks and things. There's no law. There's no written down, clear way to approach these things. You're empowering a bunch of individual people to be the arbiters of what's right and wrong, and that is so unbelievably dangerous, because you can see what it leads to.
Yep, and it's also anti-American. Well, Senator, it's always a pleasure to have you on here. I always enjoy our conversations, and don't forget, Senator Sampson will be at the Prospect Town Hall tomorrow or Wednesday night at 6:30 to 8 p.m. Who will be joining you with that one? That'll be.
I will be there with, yes, and I should have mentioned that, and thank you for saving me. But I'm going to be there with the amazing Representative Leslie Zupkis from Prospect, and she represents parts of Bethany and Cheshire also. And then my event next week is in Wolcott, and I'll be there with my amazing colleague, Representative Gail Master-Francesco, my successor in the 80th House District. And these are two amazing, great ladies, people that really deserve respect and appreciation for how hard they fight to protect our rights. They do their role, and they're really good at it.
Yep. Senator, always a pleasure to speak with you, sir. Have a great day.
Sounds good. Thank you, Steve.
Take care.